In this lesson, we're going to find the percent of a number. For example, find 20% of 50. Now let's look at this keyword 20% of 50. Of mathematically can mean multiplication. So if we think about this, this is 20% of, which means to multiply, times 50. Now we have a few different ways or different strategies we can use to find 20% of 50. 1. Let's turn 20% into a fraction. So in this case it's 20%, which is 20 over 100, times 50. Or 50 over 1 in this case. Now to make things a little easier, the fraction 20% over 100 can be simplified. So 20% over 100 can be rewritten as 1 over 5, as it in simplest form, dividing both numerator and denominator by 20. 20 divided by 20 is 1, 100 divided by 20 is 5. So now in this case I have 1/5 times 50 over 1. And again I can simplify again. 5 and 50 can both be divided by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 50 divided by 5 is 10, leaving me with an answer of 10. So 20% of 50 is 10. Another way to look at this is also, rather than using fractions, is we could say 20% times 50, starting here again, and rather than turning it into a fraction, we could turn 20% into a decimal, simply by moving your decimal over twice, going 1, 2, so this is 0 and 2/10 times 50. And then we can multiply 0 and 2/10 times 50. So in this case we have 50 times 0.2, 0.10, bringing your decimal over, and we get an answer of 10. At this point you could choose either method. Each problem, some ways might be, one way might be easier than the others. Let's take a look at some other examples. What is 55% of 400? Again, I can say, so again, our keyword here is of 400. So here I'm going to multiply 55% times 400. Again, one I could choose with using fractions. So in this case it would be 55 over 100 times 400 over 1. In this case, I can simplify directly here. I can simplify 100 and 400, dividing 100 by 100, and I get 1, dividing 400 by 100, and I get 4. So all I'm left with is actually 55 times 4, and if you multiply 55 times 4, you should get an answer of 220. And if you think for a second logically, if you think about what is 50% of 400, 50% of 400 will just be half of 400. Half of 400 is 200. So does it make sense that 55% of 400 is 220? The answer should be yes. Or 2, in this case again, you can multiply, turning 55% into a decimal, so you get 0 and 55 hundredths times 400. And again, multiplying 400 times 0.55, 0020, placeholder 0020, adding all your numbers. Do not forget that you have two decimals here, 1, 2, so 1, 2, and your answer is 220. In this case, I prefer fractions. I think it's less work. You don't have to worry about moving your decimals over. It's nice and easy. But again, the choice is yours. Let's take a look at another example. What is 12.5% of 60? What is 12.5% of 60? So again, keyword here, of. So 12.5 or 12 and 5/10 over 100 times 60 or 60 over 1. I can simplify 60 and 100, dividing both of these by 10. 100 divided by 10 is 10. 60 divided by 10 is 6. I notice here again I can still simplify 10 and 6. They share another common factor of 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So here I'm left with 12.5 times 3 and over 5 times 1. So if I do the math on the side, 12.5 times 3, get an answer of 15. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. 3 times 1, 3. Bring one decimal over, so I got 37.5 over 5. Okay, I must simplify this. So how many times is 5? Going to 37.5. Okay, 5 is a whole number. I'm going to bring up my decimal right away so I don't lose its place value. 5 times 7 is 35. Subtracting, bringing down my 2, bringing down my 5. 5 goes into 25 5 times. Remainder of 0. So 12.5% of 60 is 7.5. Again, you could have done this problem with multiplication. So in this case, it would have been 12.5 times 60. So you could have just right away done 12.5 times 60. 0, 0, 0. Placeholder, 6 times 5 is 30. 6 times 2 is 12, plus 3 is 15. Carry by 1. 6 times 1 plus 1 is 7. Adding everything up. I have one decimal here. Going to bring over my decimal place. 12.5%. I'm sorry, this was 12.5%. This should actually be 1, 2, so it actually should be 0.125 times 60. So in this case, I have 3 decimals on top, none on the bottom, moving it over 1, 2, 3. So the important part here, or the mistake here, was 12.5% times 60 should first become 0 and 125 thousandths times 60. So your first step here is turn your percent into a decimal, then proceed to multiply. Zero and 25/100% of 42 is what number? So in this case, this is 0.25 over 100 times 42 over 1. Simplify where you can. I can divide both 100 and 42 by a common factor of 2. This becomes 50. This becomes 21. Again, now I could just multiply straight across. I have 21 times 0.25. So 0.25 times 21. 520. Placeholder. 10. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. And 0 if you like. Add them. 2 decimal places in my the top number, none in my bottom. Going 1, 2, so this becomes 5.25 on my numerator, or 5 and 25/100ths over 50. So again, here at this point, you could divide 50 into 5.25. I would right away bring up my decimal. 50 goes into 5 0 times. 50 goes into 52 once. 5 0, subtract. 2 5. 50 goes into 20, so I'm bringing down my 5. Remember, every time you bring down an arrow, you must put a number up as well. 50 goes into 25 0 times. So 50 times 0 is 0. Subtracting. Bringing down another 0. 50 goes into 250 how many times now? 50 goes into 100 twice. 50 goes into 200 4 times. and 50 once, so we have 50 goes into 250 5 times, or you can simply see that 5 times 5 is 25. 250, subtracting, and you should get 0 here. So the answer becomes 0 and 105 thousandths. So 1/4% of 42 is 0 and 105 thousandths. We could do this problem again with just multiplication. So we have 0.25% of 42. First step, turn this into a decimal, moving my decimal over 1, 2. So this becomes 0.0025 times 42, and then just multiply these two numbers. Now again, some numbers are easier to turn, sometimes it's easier to turn the percent into a decimal and then multiply, sometimes it's easier to use fractions. And with practice, you'll be able to decide which one is better. So 2 times 5 is 10, 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5, 0, 0, 0 if you like. 4 times 5 is placeholder, 4 times 5 is 20, carry my 2, 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 10, carry my 1, then we get 0, 5, 0, 1. I have 4 decimal places in my top number, 0 on my second number. Going to move my decimal over 4 times, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Bring down this 0. So again, we see that the answers are exactly the same. So 0 and 105 tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So 0 and 105 thousandths. Let's take a look at one more example. Find 80% of 80. So in this case, ask yourself, would it be easier to turn 80% into a decimal or to use 80% as a fraction? Again, the choice is yours. So do I want to turn 80 over 100 times 80, or turn 80% into a decimal, become a 0.8 times 80? The choice is yours. On this particular problem, I would use fractions. 80 over 100 reduces to 4 over 5 times 80 over 1, and I can simplify. 5 and 80 have a common factor of 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 85 goes into 80 how many times? We see 5 goes into 8 once, and 5 goes into 36 times. So 5 goes into 80 16 times, and you're just left with 4 times 16, and you get an answer of 64. Or again, you can use the decimals. 0, 0, 8 times 8, 64, putting my placeholder here. So I get 0, 4, 6. And then 1 decimal on my top number, 0 on the bottom, moving my decimal over 1 time, getting an answer of 64. Again, the choice is yours, whether you use decimals or fractions, but it's good to know both. Good luck.